Hello, friends. This is Adrian Sinclair with Apodcast.com, and today my guest is Nico Smith, a cyber ninja, cyber guru, and we're going to be talking about everything cyber. Welcome, Nico. How are you, man?
Hey, everything's doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm so stoked to have you on this show. We're going to be talking about cyber. You are a captain in U.S. Army National Guard. You are a cyber network defense guru, and this is going to be an awesome show. Cybersecurity is such a hot topic that, you know, Russians hacking us, the Chinese, the North Koreans. It's always this constant cyber threat. And so I'm so glad to have you on the show because I want to share this with the audience. I want to share this with the listeners to kind of get them interested in this and maybe understand a little bit more, leave them with some tips maybe and tricks of what they can do, and just talk about your experience of getting into this field and how you got into it. Why are you liking what you're doing, and how is it in general? So welcome to the show, and let's open up with how did you get into cyber, and what is cyber in your in your world? What does that mean, cybersecurity?
Awesome. Well. First of all, I want to before I even get down that long, awesome path, I'd like to thank you for having me on your show and giving me an opportunity, a platform where I can share some of the things I've come across with your listeners and your viewers.
Awesome, great. Thank you for being here. I mean, we got introduced to a mutual friend,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna, I have some guilty knowledge about cybersecurity. I was in IT and information security, so I know a thing or two. But I'm gonna still kind of by proxy asking for the audience some of the questions that I would have if I wouldn't be familiar with cybersecurity at all. Let's talk about you a little bit. How did you get into cybersecurity, and
Hmm.
where are you at now?
Well, it's my journey is one of that's probably been shared, and the story's been told across the ages by many people. I got involved with cybersecurity pretty much based upon my curious mind. I started off as most infosec professionals in um, some type of job um, or something that's related to the field. So I started off as a help desk guy, the person
Hmm.
that you call, but that's not in the professional world. That was actually at home. I was the guy that was called and said,
Hmm.
"Hey, well, this is broken. Can you help me kind of work things out?" And not to mention, I didn't get a computer in the household until I was like 14. So a lot of
What
my
was your first computer?
wow, it was Commodore 64, and I had a Tandy. I
Yes.
had a Tandy.
Yeah. I had a Commodore 128, which was basically just
Yeah,
a Commodore 64 because you never
yep,
used the 128. And for those of you who are listening to this, yeah, the 128 meant 128 kilobytes of like memory.
exactly.
So yeah, we're I guess we're dating ourselves a little bit, but those were good old times when you had to squeeze everything into tiny memory space, right?
Yes, yes, and you just flip the floppy on the other side to play Oregon Trail just another time and not die from dysentery. So it's funny because cybersecurity, my path, like a lot of people, a lot of the professionals, it wasn't a straight path. Like I didn't go to school and learn about this cybersecurity. It
Hmm.
was just really being curious and actually, um, I thought that I was going to be cool and try, like every young man, try and impress the ladies. I thought, well, hey, if I could hack into into a high school computer and change some grades, like, I mean, surely they noticed me. And so I got involved. This is back when Microsoft and Carta kind of ran everything. We're talking America Online. We're 56K, and we're waiting for things to download. So I got in touch with a friend of a friend, and they told me that they would sell me some software that would help me do this. And
Mm-hmm.
I waited and waited. I gave $60, and this is back in the
Mm-hmm.
late 90s, early 2000s. And waited, and I actually never received anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of pushed me in the direction of I'll never rely on someone else in that way. I'll try and learn it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I started small systems soldering and programming small chips, and just kind of learning as much as I could about a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that progressed into me getting involved with people like Shylug, that's Chicago users Linux users group. I met some really awesome people there. From there, I pivoted out and did some work with Pumping Station One, or I started going and joining meetup groups, and
Mm-hmm.
that was much later on in life because Meetup wasn't around.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of people who supported and kind of saw that I was kind of a diamond in the rough. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that my success is built upon the shoulders of a very supportive community,
Mm-hmm.
where we were kind of like outcasts together, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, those were the times when you had 2600 magazine, right? That was like
mhm,
the source of hacker news, and people were sharing the ways they were taking these systems apart. And nowadays, hacker has this negative connotation of like a cyber attacker. And I don't know who. I'm actually linked up with Kevin Mitnick on LinkedIn, and I think he or someone
yeah,
mentioned like, yeah, I don't even call them hackers anymore. I'll call them like cyber attackers, because hacker, it used to mean something else, right? It used to mean someone who like was curious, took something apart, put it back together, figured out how it worked, modified it, made it better, and that was the
hmm
original meaning of the word hacker. But now it's been just hijacked by the cyber thieves and criminal element, and so I hope it's going to come back. But I hear what you're saying with like starting with understanding the basics, right? When I was in IT, I started on the desktop side, right? Just like you, desktop support, figuring out how is this thing working, how do you install things, how do you connect it to the network, and then you kind of progress from there, and you go to the network side. You understand how it's connected on the network, how are the bits flying on the wire, and then you go to the server side, and all those
hmm
components kind of fuse together, and you really need to understand all of those. You need to understand the desktop side, the server side, the network side, because all of those are part of the information systems design, right? So you need to understand all of those components. So back in the day, yeah, and so the time frame that you said, like 90s, yeah, this is kind of like when I was doing stuff as well, and it's like there was no formal education for like cyber. There was no cyber.
right,
Back
right.
then it probably even meant something different than what we are accustomed to thinking of right now about cyber. So yeah, so it's interesting how things are shifting. But let me not steal the your time over here. So you were doing the desktop side. You were meeting up with different groups. What how did you progress from there?
So, going back to what you were saying with regard to it not being really a formal education that would push someone in the area that we now call cyber, a lot of it was about LAN parties, doing as many LAN parties as possible, because if you participated in LAN parties, then you would learn more about networking, because everyone had different ways of configuring their environment to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to engage with these giant, massive desktops that they would tote around to participate in the event. So we'll fast forward a little bit further ahead to Nico as a professional, as a young professional. Now I'm not super old, but we're talking about ages, 23, or not even 23, we'll say even 25 and up, right? During that time, I had employers, USB drive-by was something that was really popular not too long ago, and it's still being talked about now. And I had an employer who saw that I was really interested in trying to get into the security aspect of everything. So I'm attending DEF CON, I'm attending B-sides, and I'm volunteering and all of these things to try and get
Mm-hmm.
involved with the in crowd. But I started I started really putting more time, like my after hours time, and whatever small amount of time that I had to myself, I would, look up things about Teensys, which is a small Arduino based chip. I'd look up things with what was then newly being introduced to the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino.
Mm-hmm.
I came up with a way to whitelist all of the um, all of the hit devices within a given network. So
Mm-hmm.
there were commercial products, but those were way more expensive.
Right.
I actually went and I looked at what system calls was happening on both Mac and PC,
Mm-hmm.
and determined, okay, well, when people are leveraging things like USB duck
Mm-hmm.
or rubber ducky, where they
Right.
get to
So,
emulate a
yeah, so let's
keyboard
talk
or
about
something.
what that is for those who don't know, because you threw a whole bunch of things that for those who are not in this space, they don't know what USB drive-by is. Um,
Okay,
can you talk about that? Because I remember those days
sure.
when that was huge. That was a huge
So
vector.
USB drive-by is the reason why military people can't use USBs inside of their machines. It's USB drive-by is when you have malicious code and it's on something. Here, I actually
Mm-hmm.
have. You just put your bad code on this thing or on
Mm-hmm.
one of these, and then you stick it into the back of um, your target's computer, and it will execute malicious code
Right.
because there up into up at during that time there was very little security regarding the different places that you can plug in devices
Mm-hmm.
like keyboards and mice. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so when we talk about rubber duckies, um, we would first have to understand what HID devices are, and that's human interface device. That's your keyboards, your mice, things that humans need to interface with. Your
Mm-hmm.
keypad. So what people started to do was they would write a small piece of script or a small piece of code
Mm-hmm.
that would then tell the computer that my USB is now a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's no logic or there's no security mechanism in place to verify whether or not it was a keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
it would just allow you to execute that bad code or that malicious code.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So uh, with with many attacks, the a lot of the perpetrators are lazy, so they'll reuse code that exists. So
Mm-hmm.
I started seeing a pattern, and then I wrote a little script that would read the USB ports on whatever machine or whatever device that you had my little device on. It was I set it up for Mac and for PC, and when people would plug in, if you didn't have the right identification number or ID on the
Mm-hmm.
hardware, then it would not allow any type of utilization on that
Mm-hmm.
port. So I had a boss. He saw me do that,
Mm-hmm.
and he allowed me to deploy it in our small IT environment.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was me creating it and the company was dealing with billions of dollars, it wasn't scalable. But
Mm-hmm.
I got the encouragement. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean
Yeah.
that's kind of where it was.
And that's what's so amazing that sometimes it's those small little things like the tinkering of tinkering with something. You mentioned something else which was Raspberry Pi, and Raspberry Pi is a for those who don't know, Raspberry Pi is like a $25 computer, like a full on computer with a full on operating system, Linux, and and I and I and I think that Nico is going to pull just pull one out of thin air.
There's one.
So there you have it. That's what Raspberry Pi looks like. It's just a tiny box. You have USB. Wow. Do you have a display on it, or is it just a
I
shiny
do.
cover? Oh, wow.
This is actually a 3.5-inch display.
Wow.
Here's the internals.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Really great place. Lady Adafruit, she
Mm-hmm.
does really great work for the maker community,
Mm-hmm.
and she's the one who. That's the place that I go to when I'm purchasing Raspberry Pis or Arduinos or any other type of small nano computing platform that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's typically where I go.
Wow. So just imagine that's the size of a full on computer, right? And that thing is, well,
Correct.
it's fairly powerful. I mean, we're not talking about something that's going to be able to do, immense amount of graphics, but that's a full on computer with operating system. Like it's,
Correct.
you can do amazing
Correct.
things in terms of like hacking, or in terms of like even automation. Those Raspberry Pis are being used in a lot of automation systems, because they're just so cheap, and it's a
Mhm.
full on system.
When I when I
So
taught
mhm.
when I
Go ahead.
taught in Chicago in high school for my after school program, I specifically chose impoverished communities because I felt like they could benefit the most from what I had to offer as a professional and as a person. So the deal was they would come in, they would pay $5 um, to take the class, and this is out of their own pocket. And
Mm-hmm.
I would teach them how to program small Linux operating systems, small applications. And the reason why is because in not only in Chicago but across America, there's a really great initiative to get technology to the students. However, if the difference between me using this device that you just gave me, an iPad, the difference between me using this iPad and me selling it,
Mm-hmm.
or the street value um, comes into consideration, it's very likely that you're going to find out that we're coming up with lost tablets or they're
Mm-hmm.
stolen. So acknowledging and looking at that, which is something that I came across when I was in Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with not introducing third world solutions to first world solutions to
Solutions.
third world
Mm-hmm.
problems. So I kind of took that knowledge and I said, okay, well, Raspberry Pi, this thing is $35. All you need is a mouse and a keyboard and a monitor, and you don't really need a monitor because it has HDMI here.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, with that said, I
That
can
means
not
that
only
you could potentially just connect it to a TV, right?
to a TV,
Yeah.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And my students would show up, and they would learn a lot of stuff. And this is something at the end of the after school program. It was theirs. I let them keep it. And
Mm-hmm.
big shout out to Element 14. They were willing to send me 100 Raspberry Pis for free,
What?
to yeah, to support my initiative.
You got to tell me more about that.
My thought process was, I was going to start a small company called TechSmith, and you can have this. I hope someone who's watching this takes it and makes it grow. Um, I had an idea, and this is what it was. If you work remotely, if you do um, tech support, and you're in another country, no one really cares how you look or where you come from. So my idea was to create relationships with local tech companies, and then go back into the at the time I was in Chicago, so I was going to go back into the urban environment, back into the schools that were low to little income, and then I would teach them a skill, and I would negotiate a $5 to $12 an hour job where the kids will be able to come in, do a small internship for, code cleanup, like just
Mm-hmm.
real low level things, but that would give them enough experience to bring about the entrepreneurial spirit that I
Mm-hmm.
see in so many of the people in those type of affected communities. And in turn, I would make relationships with like Element 14, the Arduino Foundation, to continuously send me out products, and they would get all of the benefit of me using specifically their product to provide an education and opportunity for upward mobility for those individuals. So
That's amazing stuff.
that's
That's
kind of
amazing.
where I'm at.
So yeah, and it's with such a low entry point with the price tag for such a full-on computer, and it's a computer that you don't care. You can reinstall the operating system. You can totally mess with it because it's just so cheap that it literally is just it's almost like a throwaway in a sense.
And zero street value. So I can't
Right.
sell to a drug dealer. They don't
Right,
want it.
right. No one's gonna steal that because they're like, hey, it's like $35. It's like it's not
Yeah.
worth it. And at the same time, it's such a great educational tool for kids. So let's talk about that a little bit more. You got your start, on a just doing your trying things yourself back in the day when things were a little bit harder to come by. Now you can learn pretty much a lot of it on the internet. There's just so much that's available. Back then, it was like this underground community. You got 2600. You had all these meetings that you really need.
Yep.
BBC, yeah, it was with BBC connections that you needed to make.
ICQ. Yep. Yeah. ICQ. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
ICQ, all of those. So in a way, it was like way more elite that you knew how to do something because it was just so closely guarded, and then just the access to it wasn't there. Now there's a lot of it, so it really is at a higher level. So if you really want to get into cybersecurity and you have that in you, like if you have that passion to take things apart, figure how things work, and try to modify them and to see what happens. I mean, this is a great time to live right now because it's just like
Absolutely.
there's just so much that you can do. So I'm super excited because of that, because then we can teach kids, and we definitely need we need a talented workforce of the future to be capable in computer science and cybersecurity. So what you're doing with teaching. Tell me more about that. How did you start doing that?
Wow.
How did you get engaged in that?
So coming back, what did I do? I came back from Afghanistan, or was that? Yes. No. That's before. So I decided that I really liked art. Had a degree in art, and decided to open up a art gallery in an impoverished
Hmm.
community with my partner, with a friend of mine. His name is Benjamin Maccabee. Actually, he was excited about opening up the art gallery, and he just so happened to meet me through happenstance, and then we joined and went down this venture to try and uplift people of our community. So you brought up a very interesting point with regard to access. I'm
Hmm.
super excited about the fact that with technology being where it is, the ability for people to get involved is now starting to
Hmm.
diversify the talent pool.
Yeah.
I mean, previously, you're right. If you didn't know three different people that would vouch for who you were and that you had done X, Y, and Z things, you
Hmm.
wouldn't have access to anything.
Yeah.
And for a large part, while we had, I believe, a lot stronger people when it came to execution of certain things, I feel like that group was very small and it wasn't very sustainable. So
Hmm.
it's good all around.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays, if you want to build a lab for a class, I mean, at $35 per computer, I mean, with a couple $100, you can literally set up a whole lab.
Correct.
Back in the day, when computers would cost like thousands and thousands of dollars, like very few people could afford it. So nowadays, finally, the pool of people that can get into this, who don't have that kind of money to get into this, really diversifies it, and that's what makes our cyber community strong, because you never know who's going to come to the table with ideas, with brilliance of different approaches, how to tweak something, how to approach a system, and how to exploit it or find a vulnerability or patch it, or so we grow stronger if when there is more and more people coming into the table and tinkering with this stuff.
The key point, and you can say that you had this information first with the opening of Cuba. I mean, think about how technologically they were, quote unquote, not as developed as we are in the States. But I'm really excited about the type of solutions that they're going to bring to the table, because one of my old professors taught me a thing. He said, this is back when I was painting. And I just kept on yelling. I'm like, man, I need this brush, I need this paint, I need all of these things. He said, you wanna know if a person is good, take away all the fancy things and just give them the foundational tools, and then you'll see amazing growth and measures of improvement almost instantaneously.
That is so true. Especially in Cuba. I don't know if you saw this. The ingenuity that they had coming up with solutions, low tech solutions to everyday problems. I mean, literally, they took a engine out of like a laundry machine, and they used it for something else, and they just coupled that up with something else, and just came up with this fairly sophisticated machine that was solving a problem of their everyday life. It's just amazing stuff. I mean, like taking a engine out of a car and then just using it for, it's just unbelievable stuff that they did. Again, because of that scarcity, because of that, the no access to that high tech that we enjoy over here. So that scarcity, that lack of access is kind of like, in a way, breeding ingenuity and breeding like novel solutions.
Exactly. So going back to I guess the next step, or how I foresee cybersecurity developing and growing. It's situations like that. The reason why I went back to teaching, the reason why I went into teaching, was there was an opportunity. There's a program in Chicago called After School Matters, and I had the opportunity to meet I remember her name was Olandrian Glasper, and she came by the art gallery and saw the good work that I had been doing with the community and my friend Benjamin, and she offered us an opportunity to bring our business as an educational resource for school systems that were part of the After School Matters umbrella. So found out that I taught martial arts prior to that, so there was always a teaching part of me that existed. So when I had the opportunity to sit down and work with the students, and just listening to some of the things that they were going through, and being able to relate with the different scarcities that they had in their environment, because I came from nothing. If love was currency, my family would have been rich. I mean, but so I was able to relate and take those shared experiences and show that if you apply yourself, if you see something and you pursue it, then there's opportunity for you to be successful. But on the other end, I think what we have the responsibility to do is to ensure that we don't hold on to the accesses that we have access to, or accesses or the benefits or the programs that we have access to, that we turn around and we share, and we try and provide some solution in that way. And I think this is kind of how your podcast plays a very critical role in sharing the views, the opinions, the experiences of people, and trying to help us all progress in that forward direction.
I don't know, man. It just I'm so glad, and I was just thinking like how how blessed I am that I get to connect with people like you, because that's how change happens. What you're doing, and I'm going to be talking to another teacher next week, and seeing their work with education. I mean, that is how change happens. It happens by people taking that initiative, taking what's available to them and making it work, and educating the next generation so that they can do something great, that they can find they can find a passion, they find a skill that they can do, and that's how you fix a lot of problems. And then what speaks is the skill set, the experience that they get, and that's what we need to do. We need to provide those things to them, the opportunity, so they can do those things, and there's like really no excuse nowadays not to do it, because it's just so affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm super excited, about what you're doing. Let's get back to cyber a little bit,
Okay.
in the concept of red team and blue team. Uh,
Oh wow.
can you tell? Can you talk to that a little bit for those who are like, hey, okay, you guys have been talking about education and how great this is, but like, let's talk about cyber. Like, how do I,
Okay.
how do I defend? What do I need to be aware of? Things like that.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is
And
101. Don't go too deep.
and so so here. All right. I initially started off with saying that I was driven. I was pulled in by curiosity. Um. So how do you get in? You get curious. You try and pursue something. You start off. Right now, the big sexy thing is, oh, I'm a hacker. I'm a pen tester. I do those things, and I work with Synac as a red team member for them, and that's a platform that allows you to bug bounty. So that ties back into the whole leveraging skill sets in order to become financially
Hmm.
improved, or
Hmm.
to further yourself. So for a person that's just one on one, fresh out the book, or fresh out the door, no educational experience, like
Hmm.
you just heard the word cyber, and you're foaming at the mouth. How do I get involved? What I would recommend, the first thing that I would recommend is um, hop on something like Meetup, look up a few, type in cybersecurity conferences, and just volunteer. Give up an hour of your day to a hour or a weekend out of your life, and excuse me, and excuse me, put that toward the cyber environment, or the hacking environment. There's a super welcoming group of people. Also, podcasts.
Hmm.
Not only this podcast, but there are tons of podcasts. I just got featured on a few. Um, I listened to Breaking Down Security with Brian Breaksec. Really great guy. Had me out speaking at his InfoSec camp out, the very first one.
Hmm.
Um, OBS, or IDS podcast, which is Intrusion Diversity Systems. That's a podcast. Darknet Diaries.
Hmm.
That Jeffrey Sider does a really great job at explaining what vulnerabilities look like, or what hacks look like, and he has a really great storytelling approach to things. So that's just your learning, and
Hmm.
also understand that your job doesn't end at the end of the workday. That if you're in the cyber realm, in the cybersecurity, your job. I mean, we often talk about mental health, and we often talk about work life balance, and those are all important things. However, at the rate that technology grows, spreads, and changes, there's an extra requirement of you to remain tenacious at your pursuit of learning and getting involved.
Right.
So for me, I put in an extra 4 hours after work
Hmm.
every day. I'm putting in at minimum 4 extra hours on building my own environment, getting involved with VMs and things like that.
Yeah.
But back to the first, go ahead.
Well, that's the thing with computers, technology in general, but specifically computers, is how quickly things change, and there's always something new. There's some basics that will always be, there because there's the physicality of it, like just how electrons and things move, and the binary system. But in terms of everything else, CPUs change, memory changes, our architectures change, all these new different things come out and get constantly improved. So what I'm getting at with this is that you constantly need to learn. So this is like a never-ending journey. And if you're one of those people that's what stokes your fire, that's what gets you motivated and keeps you challenged and on it, then this is a field that will keep you always satisfied and always pushing. In fact,
Absolutely.
it's going to be demanding. It's going to be demanding that you do that, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So
So.
there are websites that you can go to get your skills up.
Hmm.
Like Hack the Box, I would say is more for a intermediate type of individual, but Over the Wire also offers some really great beginner stuff, and that's overthewire.com, pwnable.cr. And if you just go to your Google and you type in
Hmm.
ctflearn.com, it will teach you, or it will give you a host of questions and things
Right.
to get your mind in the right perspective for red teaming.
And for
Now,
those who
for
don't know what CTF stands for, what is CTF, and why what's CTF?
so CTF stands for capture the flag. It's taken from old military behavior where you have two teams trying to capture each other's flag.
Hmm.
Um, there are a multitude of different flavors of CTFs. There's Jeopardy style where they'll ask you questions. There's crypto where they'll ask you to decrypt something, or you're leveraging computer language to figure out the answer to that. Then you have steganography. Steganography is when they hide things in pictures and
Hmm.
voice recordings. As a matter of fact, I'm putting together a CTF that's going to be featured next month.
Hmm.
Uh, and
Where?
also, my CTF is going to be featured at the Winter Summit in Alexandria, Virginia, at Marymount College. That's February 1st
Hmm.
from 12 to 5 with Blacks in Cyber. Um, that it's just an opportunity for me to continuously give what little I have to our amazing community.
Hmm.
That's kind of what CTF is more
Hmm.
in the it's traditionally focused on adversarial behaviors inside of computer systems.
Hmm.
And then you have go ahead.
So in terms of just to kind of bring this a little bit closer for the audience over here. So what happens is you have two teams, and they pretty much are trying to hack their systems, or maybe another system like a server, and capture the flag. Is when they get a token, when they find something, a piece of information, which is kind of the equivalent of that flag, physical flag that in the military times, where a team try to outflank someone and get that flag from the opponents, and so it's kind of the equivalent stuff, but in the realm of the computer systems and computer networks. So it's basically two teams competing to get something, and who's going to get there first basically captures the flag. And that's why CTF is used as this kind of moniker for this idea of such an exercise, where people just exercise. And it's great exercise because teams have to collaborate. They got to figure out what the environment looks like, what do they
Yep.
need to do, and in order to exploit a system or find vulnerability in a system, and then get in that system and find that flag to win.
Yep. And it's not, you got to remember that it's impossible, literally impossible to know everything. So it's a really great opportunity for you to go out and learn. There's a lot of people that tend to say, "Hey, I'm not at that speed yet where I can do it." Just go, try. I guarantee you that you'll have fun and you'll want to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And a very unknown or a under practiced behavior that I see starting to change is seeing more blue teamers inside the CTFs, right? So you've heard the old adage, the best offense is a good defense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you go and you participate in these CTFs, then you kind of understand a lot more of the mechanics, a lot of more about the methodologies that are involved, and these breaches that you hear about every day, and these hacking or these exploits that we read about in the news every day.
Mm-hmm.
So
And for those who don't know, here's another kind of cyber related term, which is red team and blue team. Can you talk about that? What does that mean, red team and blue team?
So your red team is typically your adversarial team. Those are the guys that are the malicious actors inside your space.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of companies, they'll have an internal red team, which actually does internal audits to make sure that the organization is doing well and is as secure as you can be. And then you have your blue teamers. Your blue teamers are typically your defenders. Those are the unsung heroes that no one really says things about.
Blue team.
Um,
Shout out to the
just
blue
think
teams.
Absolutely. Just think about it. You never call Bob in if your system is working. So no one ever says, "Hey, those defenders, they're
Yeah.
they're working at it every day,
Mm-hmm.
and we got breached that one time."
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And
big
that's
shout out to those
hmm
guys.
and that's the the defenders. They have the tougher job of because you have to defend all the time. The attacker
Right.
can choose the maybe not the place, well the place too, but mainly the time. So they can exploit the systems at an opportune time, and they have easier work in a sense of penetrating or work wise. It takes less effort to versus a defender. They have to be up all the time. They have to monitor everything all the time. They have to look at are all of our systems secure, or do we need to patch anything? What are the vulnerabilities? So it's a way tougher job in that sense, and it's also less, like you said, less appreciated, because when nothing happens and everything is defended and everything is attacks repelled, you don't get like, oh, attaboy, you did a great job. It's they're like just,
Right.
oh, okay, everything is working. What are you talking about?
Exactly. And one caveat to kind of even the playing field as well. While there is a common thought process that red teaming is easy, but in all actuality, in my opinion and from my experience, red teamers are blue teamers that are leveraging good access control, good practices in a malicious way. So
Hmm.
they are monitoring your network. As a matter of fact, there are several cases where people have been hacked for years, and their system continuously is being updated because the hacker doesn't want to lose access.
Mm.
So to that point, I think they're equally challenging positions,
Hmm.
but kind of like the terminology of hacker. Um, the minute that our advertising department got hold of that term, it
Hmm.
became different than how us in the community recognize one another.
Right. Yeah. So let me clarify a little bit. I didn't want to leave an impression that red team work is easy peasy. You run a script and you're in. Absolutely not. Not. It takes time. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes oftentimes brilliance to figure out things. It's really detective work because you're trying to find the chink in the armor of a system, and also red team and blue team. To add on, so our audience understands, red team is oftentimes it's a penetration testing team, which literally is either hired or works within an organization, and their job is to find the chink in the armor, the vulnerability in the system on the network for organization or a company. Before the malicious hackers, malicious attackers find it and exploit it. So they are equally important and equally skilled and all of that. I think the point that I was trying to make is that, they can plan the attack and they can execute it when they want. and
Correct.
versus blue teamers, they all like, do we have everything
They
patched
got to
up?
be
Is
on
do we
all
have
the time.
yeah, all the time, and it's
All the time.
exhausting in a way because like, are we attacked? Have we been attacked and we don't know it? Like it's almost like the state of healthy paranoia that you have to be in order to be a good blue teamer. So you always look at these signs like, oh, is this an indicator of some kind of malicious activity, and you're baselining things and comparing, and so it is exhausting in that sense. So that's how I meant that they have a tougher job from that respect.
I agree 100% with everything you said.
So let's talk about what are the sort of like the top. Let's give some tips to the audience who are listening to this.
Okay.
Let's say I'm just an everyday, computer user. I don't have computer science degree. I don't have any, cyber training, and I want to stay safe out there on the internet or at home on my computer and stuff like that. What are some of the things
Okay.
that you would recommend?
Oh wow. That you're if that's who you are, you're my favorite type of person because it means that you want to do better, right? So the first thing that I would recommend is um, if you're using I mean, and I probably sound like a broken record because everyone's saying this, but if you use, you got to use multiple passwords. Now, if you choose to use a password manager, that's great, but let's first start off with like getting something like Bitwarden in your, excuse me, in your world where that will manage your passwords and it will give you that entropy or those different 12 to 24 letter triple
Hmm.
uppercase and symbol
Right,
implementation
it's more
to
complex password. Hmm.
I would say passphrases. I'm
Hmm.
very big on I I like to read sometimes. So I pick up a few books. I'll pick up any like two or three books off my shelf, and then I'll just turn the pages and then find a sentence, and that'll be
Hmm.
my password.
Hmm.
That's a really great way to introduce
Oh my
some
goodness.
variety.
I'm gonna interrupt you over here because that was kind of like a little bit of a study that I did when I was studying computer science at Rutgers, and I was doing a comparison between shorter complex passwords, and by complex I mean uppercase, lowercase, a number, a special character, and non-repeating. So all those different, like as difficult as you possibly can. You will not memorize it. I mean, we're talking about
Oh,
uppercase that you have uppercase A and then dash and then dollar sign and then just all these different things. Not so what happens? People just kind of write them down on a sticky note and it's sitting on
right.
somebody's keyboard or in
The
their wallet.
keyboard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
and so that is that doesn't work. That clearly doesn't work. And so I was making a comparison, just mathematically modeling like the permutations of like and how quickly could you crack a shorter password but more complex, and versus like a long phrase, uh, which is what you just mentioned. And at some point the long phrase is easily superseding the shorter complex password. So you're better off with like a super long, like not a paragraph, but like a long, a sentence. That it's best if you concoct one, or you can kind of splice it from
Right.
from different
Right.
different things, and that's going to be way more secure than this short super complex password. But back to you, Nico. Sorry,
and
I had to jump
and
in.
but I mean you're absolutely right, and then if it's not something that you feel comfortable with, you're not going to practice it. So I often, and this is me on the soapbox, cybersecurity is not a thing that you can inject into a environment. It is a complete lifestyle. That means how you go about things. You In order for you to be successful in it, I think that you might have to change some ways that you behave, right? So instead of lending your friends your Netflix password, right? Besides that, I don't endorse cheating. But if you're gonna do something like that, don't make that password also the same password to your Gmail and to
Hmm.
all your other critical things. There's also something called a tiered approach where you draw out the most important things inside of your cyber presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need my Gmail because my Gmail is connected to my calendar, which is connected to blah, 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 right? So that's going to be really close in the center. And that's going to that's going to receive the largest amount of protection. Then I'm going to move out. Okay, well, I have a Pizza Hut or some type of weird Petco password, right? That's not really that important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really gonna worry if someone
Mm-hmm.
gets that information. But then the devious part of me also comes into play with the idea of it's a practice that I do. I actually have there are services that are out there like mysudo.com,
Mm-hmm.
and what mysudo.com will do is they'll give you a a credit card number and a phone number that you can burn and use and associate specifically with different services. So if you're really trying to be cyber secure, you care about grandma. Okay, if you care about grandma, get what I consider and what most people consider as a burner number. Give it a lifestyle. It has to have a life. So I like freebies. I love it when people walk up to me and they say, "Hey, we'll give you this if you sign up." And recognizing that I like those type of free things, I have a phone number, I have a email, and I have an address
Mm-hmm.
where I provide to those people who are marketing, so that I don't get spam inside of
Mm-hmm.
my mailbox.
Right.
I actually have a person who is like, they're called sock puppets. That's where I got my moniker, socks. Um, so it's called a
We'll
sock
talk about
puppet.
that too.
And you go forth and then you're able to get whatever you want without sacrificing your security, because
Mm-hmm.
your identity is yours and you should
Right.
treat it that way. Also
Mm-hmm.
for kids under I believe at 4 years old and older, please, please, please contact the contact the trans union, the creditors, and then get their social security number locked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a lot of the people who are out there doing bad things with people's social security numbers, there are kids that have been their social security, their credit is done because it's been compromised in a breach, and the nefarious actor doesn't care, and you as a parent may not have known. So this is me telling you that there are you can call the you not the IRS, you can call the Social Security Administration and
Mm-hmm.
request to have a lock put on.
Mm-hmm.
They'll give you a pin, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
also give you a password that you create. You take that, you scan it, and you put it in somewhere super safe,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, a fireproof, a big
Mm-hmm.
deposit box. And then when they turn 18 or whatever age that they're credit worthy in your eyes, then
Mm-hmm.
have that discussion,
Mm.
because that's how we ensure that our children are safe.
That is a very good tip. That is a very good tip. And as a father, I haven't even considered, like my daughter is going to be 5 soon, and I haven't even considered that I got to protect her Social Security. Thank you for
Yep,
that.
yep, yep. Not it's not mine. It's for free. It's knowledge.
I
You
know,
know.
but you mentioned it. I wouldn't like,
Yeah, yeah,
at some point, I guess like when she would be like a teenager, like, hey, going to be getting like a credit card maybe or something. But like, hey, you should protect it. If you don't look into it, you don't if you don't monitor,
you don't know. You
there
don't know.
might be bogus accounts and things opened up under your children's names, and
Yep,
that's
yep.
yeah. What else?
Um, so we what did we do? We covered
So we did
password.
passwords.
We covered
Mm-hmm.
kids. Let's talk about two-factor authentication. We
Mm-hmm.
definitely want to use that because if by some reason someone finds my password that's written on the back of my monitor, I want
Mm-hmm.
at least a text message asking me if that's me that's signing in.
Right.
Um,
So what is a
be
two-factor authentication for those who don't know? How would you
two-factor
explain that?
So two-factor authentication is a secondary means to which you can prove who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that it is actually you that is partaking in this transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us don't really deal with two-factor authentication, or prior to Google introducing it as being something that you had. We really didn't worry about it until,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm talking early '90s, early 2000s. We didn't worry about it unless we were traveling to some foreign country. Then we wanted to get alerts on our phone if our credit card came up missing and blah blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, it's the same. Two-factor authentication is that exact same model,
Mm-hmm.
except for your technology.
Right.
It is a means to contact you, the user, to confirm that it is you who is doing these things, which
Mm-hmm.
then gives you the opportunity to repudiate or to deny these
Mm-hmm.
charges, and then to quickly mitigate the risk that you're being exposed to.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's a great tip, and it's more and more prevalent now because everybody has a mobile phone. So companies tend to use those two-factor authentication methods, especially for like transactional things. You know, sometimes like when you log into your bank, you're just going to log in with username and password. But you know, if you want to do a wire transfer or something, they will be like, okay, we need to know that
Right.
you are you and somebody didn't is not impersonating you. So we're going to send you a text message or call you or send you an email, and you have to validate that this is what you're actually, it's you that is doing these actions.
Absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. It's all about making sure that you're as safe as possible.
What else? What else do you have it in your quiver of cyber arrows?
Um, so, I mean, a lot of people may consider what I've done as being a little bit of extreme, but what I did was I set up a corporation in order to truly protect my children from all sorts of nefarious actions out on the internet. Now, I know I was pretty vague, and I'll try and dive down in and be a little bit more
Yeah,
specific.
please do. I'm curious. I like that's the first time I'm hearing that. Yeah, go ahead. What is it?
So,
Corporation for your kids.
So what I did was first I have a what do I have? I have soldiersandsaints.com, right? It's a website that I started up because I was interested in doing more for the military aspect of my life, and I wanted to do more for our men and women in uniform. So I started up that website, and I did a little bit of fundraising and was able to do some good stuff. Well, as that after you create a website and you have a server, you don't just want to let it sit there, right? You want to maximize its usage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I did, because I'm interested in cybersecurity, is I did what was called, I opened up a G Suite account. Now, G Suite is part of Google, and I'm sure that some of your viewers or your listeners are going to be a little bit put off by it, but I did some research to try and provide what's called mobile device management, a mobile device management solution within my everyday life. So, for those of you who don't know what mobile device management is, when you go and you work at a corporation, they often give you a cell phone. Now, in order for them to properly protect the business secrets, trade secrets, and actions, they want to make sure that you're not able to scan and send off any of the tags or any of that. And they want to also make sure that
Right.
if you get your product stolen, be it an iPhone, iPad, Android phone, or tablet, what have you, that they could quickly secure the information and wipe the device.
Mm-hmm.
So, a little bit backstory on me. I am remarried now, so that means that I had a wife prior to, and from that marriage, I had two children. Before my children are 10 and 12 now. Before my divorce and before my separation, I never imagined, I never wanted my kids to have access to like cell phones and things like that till they're like 15, 16 years old. I thought that that would be a reasonable time. However, with me being military involved and and no longer part of the immediate household,
Mm-hmm.
there's a need. I want to talk and call my
Right.
children. Well, that introduced a cell phone into my plan. So when I initially got a cell phone, it was discovered that I discovered because I'm looking at logs and things like that, that the cell phone that I provided to the children had been jailbroken
Mm-hmm.
by someone that was not me.
Mm-hmm.
So after doing a
Can
little
you can
bit
you
more,
explain can you explain to those who don't know what jailbreaking your phone
sure,
means?
sure. Jailbreaking is when someone takes a phone and they unlock all of the proprietary systems so that you can quickly install your version of whatever. So if you have an iPhone and you want to download, they used to download, uh, uh, gosh, I forget the name of it. Um, malicious or free applications on iPhones
Mm-hmm.
a while ago. And then for go ahead.
So it was a way of sidestepping the built-in security of the
Correct.
phone, like jailbreaking it.
Correct.
That's why I think that's why they call it jailbreak because, like, whether it's iPhone or Android, creates this jail for the application, so only the approved ones can kind of live in
Yep.
it. And if you jailbreak, you kind of open up the door, and then you can let any kind of software being installed on your phone. That's kind of how I
Correct.
understand it. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think that that's a pretty accurate presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so discovered that occurred on the phone, and my ex-wife reported to me that the kids were actually getting calls at like 2 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the time, my kids are 7 and 9, so I know they didn't jailbreak the phone. So something occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After researching and looking, because it was an Android, I looked at and if you use an Android, then you typically have to marry your Android with a Gmail account.
Mm-hmm.
So I created a Gmail that wasn't attributable to my children in any shape or form. But I also had the password so I could see the map onto
Mm-hmm.
where it went to get jailbroken and things like that. So their what was it? Their chat client started getting Arabic messages and all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Now that makes sense geographically because over in the Middle East it's not 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's a little bit later in the
Mm-hmm.
day. So after looking and witnessing that, I decided that it was time for me to introduce mobile device management into my
Mm-hmm.
life. So I looked at how previous jobs that I worked at, what services they utilized in order to offer mobile device management. And also, I needed to concern myself because I'm one guy trying to
Mm-hmm.
talk to two kids, right? So I don't
Right.
want to spend $800 a month in
Right.
order to protect my family,
Yeah.
right?
A corporate solution for two phones.
Exactly, exactly. So I did the research. I looked at how I could cobble together a solution. All the free open source solutions that I found required an extremely high amount of understanding about
Mm-hmm.
SIP, which is related to phones, and all sorts of knowledge that I didn't have the time nor the gray matter to process at the time. So I looked at Google. Google offered a plan for G Suite that I could marry to my home based server or my personally owned server for $5 per user
Mm-hmm.
with $35 a month,
Mm-hmm.
and then I could also enclose all the communication. So I could whitelist who called, I could whitelist the
Mm-hmm.
applications, I could deny, and I could also, going back to that side channel thing, I
Mm-hmm.
could stop what's called ADB side loading, which is when you bypass the Android protective features by introducing firmware on top of the pre-existing software. So with all of those solutions, I got smart, and I rolled it out, deployed it, and I pushed it out to my kids. And again, going back to what keeps people safe, convenience. Well,
Mm-hmm.
because my kids don't have to maintain or monitor anything, they can just say, "Hey, Papa, I want Candy Crush." I'm of course going to say no, but they want a thing, I can easily just jump in and add it to the approved apps.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it has another feature inside of it, um, which is the vault. So while they're texting and things like that, I can't read them in real time. However, because it's part of a corporate domain, quote unquote, the Smith domain,
Mm-hmm.
I can, if there were, let's say someone stole it and began chatting with their friends about this brand new phone that they got, I could actually utilize those chat records, and they would stand up in the court of law.
Mm-hmm.
So there's legal parts that I start to benefit from, and also security practices that I start to
Mm-hmm.
protect from. Because if your kids lose their phone, it's not only that they're going to lose that phone, it's all the pictures, because kids don't care what they take pictures of.
Mm-hmm.
So think about how exposed you are as a family
Mm-hmm.
if their phone gets stolen.
Right.
So that's kind of where I was.
So that is a lot of steps that you've taken, and a huge that could be a course in itself. Just to kind of teach families how to protect kids from cyber kids and family members who are not cyber experts like you are.
Yeah.
Um, where can people find out more about this? Do you do some of do you have some of that on your website or any resources? Where would you point people to kind of learn more about this?
So I actually do on my website, soldiersandsaints.com, underneath conference slides, I actually have defending the at home, like the enterprise. And if you read that or listened to it, I believe I recorded it, you'll be able to find out just that same information I shared with you, plus a lot more data. Also, I've been going. I'm actually going to be giving this talk at SkiCon NE, uh, February 21st of this year in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, as often as I get the opportunity to, a lot of people have been reaching out to have me come and talk about some of my experiences within this space. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you hit me up on Twitter for parents who specifically are looking for ways to protect their children, feel free to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty much a advocate of safer solutions for our families, and especially
Mm-hmm.
for the kids.
So, for those of you who are just listening to this show, soldiersandsaints.com, and Nico can be found on Twitter as well at Nikolai Smith 1. And that's a number one over there. So that's how they can find you and I guess lean on some of the leverage some of the stuff that you've already done. So it's a
Yeah.
trusted source for some of the you already blazed the trail, so to speak. And so because it is difficult, right? It's difficult for families who just don't have the cycles to learn all of this. They got their life. They are not in IT. They are not in cyber. And at the same time they want to protect their kids. What bubbles up in the news is often like how what this gets hacked, that gets hacked, but you also want to
Hmm.
protect your kids because like there was outbreak of webcams like a nanny cams being hacked into
Absolutely.
and some
Hmm.
and some uh, how do I call politically correct these people who would do these things like uh,
Pedo.
yeah, it's just like in the middle of the night, talking to this nanny cam speaker to trying to scare your
Right.
kids and whatever weird stuff, and it's just as a parent you want to do the best but it's overwhelming. So thank you for sharing that, and hopefully people can go to your website and learn more about it. um, I think that would be a great course to do, like, cyber for parents, how to, like accessible stuff. Maybe you and I should partner on that and create something.
I'm 100% behind you. If you want to get something like that together, this is me and you. We can make it work.
Yeah, I think that would be very valuable for people because, like, how do I do this step by step? What can I, so it's like it's easy to do. It's affordable. You don't, and it's something they can support and sustain because it's not only
Right.
sometimes you do things once, but then you have to kind of maintain it. So yeah, we'll give it a
Exactly.
thought. We'll give it a thought.
Yeah.
I like that. So we talked about passwords. We talked about securing the mobile devices. Um,
Mhm.
we, we talked about creating sort of throwaway accounts and a phone. So kind of creating a profile of you of like a person internet persona, which can be utilized for all those things that you don't want to give out your personal information, whether it's like registering on a website and you oftentimes you can utilize things like a 10-minute email, which is a service that allows you to get just a burner email. So if you need to kind of register for something just temporarily and you don't want to give them your email address and be spammed forever and ever, you can utilize services like that. So there's a lot of that out there. Um, One of the things that I wanted to mention is just physical security. Physical security to not leaving your stuff in
Mhm.
places that can be easily, accessed, and because your device can be compromised fairly quickly. Even where you mentioned it originally, the USB, rubber ducky attacks, which was basically if you left your computer unlocked and running, someone could literally just walk over, plug this
And
little
just
USB device into your computer, and literally within seconds, 30 seconds, your computer was hacked and was owned by someone else. And so physical security, I think, is an important thing to keep in mind. So don't, if you're traveling somewhere and you're in a potentially hostile place where someone's going to walk into your hotel room and hack your phone, hack your computer by having physical access to it. Take it with you. Take it with you. Put it in a safe place. I wouldn't trust the safes in the hotel rooms, but definitely carry stuff with you. So if you have physical access to it, that's kind of like a step one for me.
might I interject something
Yeah,
along what you just got
please.
finished talking about? So I'm holding in my hand this is a 32 gigabyte memory stick, right? I'm sorry if it's blurry. Here it
Hmm.
is, right next to my
Yep.
face. Pretty small, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Tiny.
if you can get your hands on one of these, go to I believe it's tails.com,
Hmm.
and you can download an operating system that it doesn't persist. It just lasts for the moment that you're utilizing that USB. Now now why would you do that? One, I advocate if you're going to travel, try and travel as light as possible. Back to this physical security thing. The more stuff that you have, that's more stuff that you have to secure, which means that's less time that you're going to have to really enjoy yourself, right?
Hmm.
So try and reduce down to, if you can get away with using a tablet, take a tablet with you and the lightest laptop that you have. But if you're traveling into international places, like I know there are some reports of certain countries. Once you scan your laptop or you have your laptop in check-in, the reason why it takes so long for it to go through, and it will proceed through the security without you, is because they're pulling out and they're duping hard drives and sending it along the way.
Hmm.
So full disk encryption is pretty useful in
Hmm.
those places, but even more useful than that is not even having the data there for them to leverage. So wiping
Hmm.
your machine completely when you go to wherever you're going to go, and then uploading something like, even they're called live USBs or live CDs,
Hmm.
putting Ubuntu or any flavor of Linux on here, and it'll allow you to get all that access that you want. And then when you go overseas, it's a blank computer anyway. They can scan at it all that they want, and then you just plug your USB in, and then you have an operating system. Then when you come home, same thing. Just pull the USB out, send the hard drive, send the laptop through, and
Hmm.
then and you don't have to worry about that. And also, please stop leaving your computers out when you're going to the bathroom at Starbucks and when you're at the library. those are they're safe for you not to be snatched out of, but not so much for your electronics to not be sniffed. Leverage a VPN whenever you can, and that'll at least not only does that keep malicious actors from being able to read your stuff, and VPN is virtual private network that gives you encryption from your computer out to wherever you're going. Um, Not only does that stop malicious actors, but also your cable company loses visibility, or your ISP, your internet service provider, loses visibility on what you're surfing, and they should. That's your private information. It's not their business where you go or what you're surfing on. And you will see, if you implement these type of strategies, that you'll get less and less ads, less and less things that are geared toward your specific behavior process.
Mm. Yeah. If there's one thing that I've learned in my career, is that it's a layered approach, right? It's like an onion. You're putting multiple layers, and it's all about how, I don't want to use paranoid as a, and you should be paranoid on for some things. Like, clearly, the computer on which you're accessing your bank account, you want to protect it, because if you lose, if you lose, you either lose it, or you don't protect it, and it gets hacked, then someone can literally impersonate you, and then wipe out your bank accounts and things like that. But the point that I was driving towards is that it's a multiple layer thing. It's not just one thing. It's not a pill you can swallow and then suddenly everything is secured. The level of the security is going to be depending on what you're protecting, which is what you mentioned, Nico, right? Like you obviously, like your Petco password is not as important as your bank account password, right? And so you would want to protect it in several different ways, and more so on the things that are more important to you. So it's a constant sort of like learning. I personally am a lifelong learner, so to me, this is I love that. That's part of who I am. So I love learning new things. But it is a burdensome thing, especially when you're a family. You got a bunch of kids, and you got to do that. Suddenly, that becomes work, and
Yeah.
and then just impacts your life. So, other than the things that you've mentioned, what else are you doing or practicing in your sort of day in day out life, and teaching your kids and your family members to practice, just as a good sort of cyber hygiene, to make sure that they're staying safe out there, and they're like doing the right things to kind of keeping themselves away from being targeted, because a lot of the times it's just minimizing your surface as a target is good enough for like not getting attacked. Because if it's just the same as with like alarm systems in houses, right? If a burglar wants to break into a house, and they see an alarm system and then next door they see a house without any alarm system at all, that's a lower hanging fruit. So they will most likely go to the other house versus the one that has an alarm. And in a similar way, it's in cyberspace. So what are your thoughts on that? How people can kind of day to day practice their cyber hygiene, security approach?
Well, the first thing that, amongst other things that I mentioned, the first thing is own yourself, right? If someone calls from some company and they're trying to tell you that they're from the IRS, and you owe them X, Y, and Z, the first thing that you want to do, and this is really important because it happened to my wife, right? You figure a person who's really into cyber, my spouse will be, the most cyber, but everyone, this is a something that you have to work on every day.
Mm-hmm.
But as we get closer to the tax return season, and the holidays, you're going to get a lot of phone calls that say, "Hey, I'm calling from the IRS, or I'm calling from these different places." The first thing that you want to do is own yourself, right? And what I mean by that is, the first thing is that you don't owe a conversation to anyone, right? Keep that in the forefront of your mind. You don't have to talk to anyone on the phone, right? So as soon as they start talking, "Hey, I'm Bob from X, Y, and Z, and you owe the IRS $40,000, and if you don't give me your bank account number to transfer this, we're going to send you to jail." First thing
Mm-hmm.
that you want to do is say, "Hey, thanks, Bob, for calling me. and you're going to say their name back so that
Mm-hmm.
you're acknowledging their name, you're also writing down that name. And
Mm-hmm.
then the second thing you're going to say is, hey, where are you from again? They're going to say from the IRS or whatever, A, B, and C, whatever. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
write that down. Then you know what you're going to do? You're going to look at your phone and you're going to hit that red button, hang up on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing that? One, you're owning yourself. You're going back, you're maintaining positive control of yourself, because the longer that they talk to you, the more pressure that they're going to drive you into providing information about your environment or PII that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have before. So you want to limit the length of time that you're on that actual phone call. And just to make sure that that wasn't really the IRS, you're gonna call the IRS. You're gonna jump on the internet, and let's say they called from Bank of America, because that's where the other guy called from with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she luckily hung up a little bit later than I would have liked, but nothing crazy came out of it. She hung
Mm-hmm.
up the phone. So the next thing that you're gonna do, you're gonna hop online, and then you're gonna look at fraud at whateverbusiness.com, right? And then you're gonna call that. You're gonna find a number. You're gonna call that number, and then you're gonna provide the agent the name and that phone number that they call from. And then I know a lot of people are like, well, they're using robo dialers. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. That's one less phone number that they can use
Right.
to get someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing that you can do along that same line, if you're unsure about that number, you can actually drop that phone number into Google, and then there's a lot of things that'll pop up. But if it's been a fraud caller, it'll pop up that it'll say suspected fraud in one
Mm-hmm.
of the links that's listed, and then you can actually look at it. That's how you own yourself. You maintain positive control in that way.
I like that.
Um,
I like that. That's so
when
important because, these spammers, scammers, and those spear phishing and whale phishing, all of that stuff that's happening. And I know I just threw out a bunch of terms that I should probably define, but when they call you and they're trying to scam you, the longer they are with you on the phone, they might pull some information that they found about you, or like, that you or your family, someone left on the internet, and they will use it to the advantage to kind of help build authority that they see, that
right,
they are trying to
right,
portray. And unfortunately,
yep,
a lot of older people fall victims of that because
correct.
they don't know any better, and that's who those criminals are preying on. So that's very sad. So yeah.
A big shout out to, if you have time, and if any of your listeners are interested, there are people that are out there that actually try and thwart the behavior of these people who call up other people. I know one YouTuber called Kit Boga.
Hmm.
He's very entertaining. He'll keep the scammers on the phone for 48 hours, and just to have them burn through phones. Another way that you can make sure that your cyber hygiene is kind of where it needs to be is use something. Go to a website called Have I Been Pwned,
Hmm.
PWNE.com. Um, the curator of that website has done such a amazing job at trying to aggregate, people's PII that's being spread across the dark web and in nefarious places on the internet, in an effort to make sure that you have an opportunity to call your credit agency
Hmm.
and change your PIN, or hop on your Gmail and then change your number. So if you
Hmm.
go to like haveibeenpwned.com, also offer a small service for a small fee, where they'll
Hmm.
email you every time your name and your email address pops up inside of some type of breach.
Hmm.
So
So how do
that's
you
something.
how do you spell that? It's Have I Been Pwned?
Yeah,
PWND, is it?
PWNE as in Echo, D as in Delta.
ED. Okay, good. Yeah, the audio
Yep.
cut out over there for a second. I wanted to make sure that we have that. And then PII, for those who You can tell that Nico is ex-military because he still lives in the world of acronyms, which is tough to shake. PII is
Yeah.
personally
Well,
identifiable information.
Yep.
So personally identifiable information is information about you, combination of, let's say, your name and your social security number, or your date of birth and your name. Anything that can identify you as an individual, that kind of information needs to be protected, because when you think about it, when people open up credit cards, that's what companies are asking for you. Like, what is your social security? Where do you live? What is your name? What's your date of birth? What's your mother's maiden name? All that stuff, that's PII, and you need to protect that.
Yep. And like for those questions that you get asked when you're signing up for new accounts, what I like to do is like when it asks you like what city you were born in, or even what's your pet's nickname. I
Mm-hmm.
like to put like cars or like places that I've been that I really like Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah.
I like to put in not what it's asking, because there's no
Yeah.
rule that says that you have to put what it's asking.
That's right. That's right. And they won't know. So it's just smart, because again, that data individually might not be like, oh, so someone knows what your favorite color is. That might not matter. But when you combine it with a bunch of other information, now that suddenly is an information that can be utilized in different ways. So yeah, protect that. It's kind of like a little bit security by obscurity, where you're kind of like masking that, and just like, hey, my pet's dog is whatever. I'm not gonna say it over here because I don't use mine as well. It's Cujo 123.
Oh, you got a Saint Bernard too?
Wow, what an amazing coincidence.
Hey.
Great. So I love this conversation. I think we could go forever because this topic is bottomless. I mean, cybersecurity. I think we probably are going to have a sequel and talk more about it. Find out what our audience would like to learn. I think like approachable online course for parents, how to protect themselves and their family members and their kids in cyberspace would be an awesome thing. Especially something that's well done, that's approachable, that people are, because like, people that are in the industry tend to throw out a lot of acronyms and names and concepts that, regular people that are not in that space don't know. So it's intimidating right off the bat. It's like talking to a surgeon and they throw out like Latin names and you're like, all right, we're just, we might as well talk about something else.
Right. I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So let's conclude on what is ahead of what is ahead for you. We've done some tremendous work that I love, like with education. I'd love to talk to you more about that as well in our sequel. Because I think that's really worthwhile in terms of like letting people know what's possible so that they can help themselves and help other people, and with education and pushing people forward to trying to learn these things that used to be super complex. Now they are way more accessible. So I'm super glad that you're doing that in the education and teaching space. What else are you doing, and what is ahead of you in near term?
For the near term, I am pretty much just working we talked about my CTF, so going around spreading the gospel of cyber and giving people the opportunity, on the entry level. I want all new people to come out and engage me and try this out, because I want to get the fear away from people. I also I have a couple talks that's coming up. You heard SkiCon Northeast, but we also have Marymount College, and with everything, if all the stars aligned, Threatwire may be my next podcast, which would be really cool. But other than that, just trying to keep the nation safe, going to work every day, and giving my best to make sure that you guys can sleep well at night, and none of your data is being leaked out to the other side.
So for those of you who want to find out more, you can go to, well, let me pull out, let's have this title over here, which is your website, soldiersandsaints.com. You
Yep.
can find more information about Nico and what he's doing and what he's up to. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope that you've learned a thing or two. And please hit us up on social media. Subscribe to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, and comment. Give us some feedback. What is it that you would like to um, have our guests talk about, especially with Nico in terms of cybersecurity. And we will for sure have another episode, and we'll talk about maybe some specific things that are kind of buzzing right now that people are interested in terms of security. Maybe we can make it a little bit more accessible to people. And I would love to hear, because you are out there in the trenches. You are doing this right now, so you know what's happening. Maybe we'll talk about some topics that are kind of hitting up news as well, which is hackers hacking systems. What about the Russians influencing the voting and the Chinese and all other malicious actors out there, and maybe that's of interest to our viewers. So we'll see what happens, but I'm super glad to have you. Thank you so much. And if you want to, do you want to do another shout out to anybody else? Anybody specific? I do want to say thank you to DJ, who introduced us.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
DJ, thank you so much. And we'll have DJ over here in the studio. He's going to be visiting us, and so we're going to be recording and talking about cyber as well. But
Oh,
props to
that's
him.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh yeah.
And of course, it goes without saying that if you're going to be visiting, Utah, this part of the country, you're absolutely welcome to visit us. And I would love to have you in the studio and talk more cyber.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you. You stole my shout out. I was definitely gonna give a shout out to DJ, because that guy is very amazing. I'd like to thank all the people who've been very supportive of me and my development, and the military aspects. I got a Colonel Whitaker and a Colonel Terry Williams, who've always been champions for me being the best person that I could be. And then over into the private sector, your Brian Breaksec, you, um, we got O'Shea Bowens, and just some really amazing people at Provost that have always been there, just telling me, hey, you can do it. Just give it a chance and try it.
Awesome. On that note, thank you again, and until next time.
All right. Have a great one. Thanks for having me again.